What's up, dudes? Max here, back from Summer Games Fest and some impressions of games at the show. And today's a pretty important one because it is revolving around an approximate 15 to 30 minute gameplay demonstration that we saw with our own eyes of Monster Hunter Wilds. And I'm not going to beat around the bush. This game was effing amazing. Let's get started because this was effectively my game of the show. I'm trying to think of how I describe this because, again, this was an actual in-game demonstration from Capcom. There were like build issues sometimes with it, which means it's active and not actual, BS. And they effectively took us through a hunt of one of the most basic monsters, essentially the big cover art monster. I think it's the Doshuguma. I think from a perspective of the trailers that we had before, I was kind of expecting something, and this was not it. And what we see in the trailers does look really cool and exciting, and as they're pitching it to us, it does sound neat. But to me, the trailers seem like kind of a bit of smoke and mirrors, and like, oh, I think this is CG, I think this isn't. So I wasn't expecting that level of polish when it came to the game itself. And believe it or not, the game itself had that level of polish, and I was kind of mind blown as a result. My apologies if I'm using trailer footage and screenshots to go through during this because we did not get any like B-roll of gameplay stuff. This was just based on our impressions in describing this, so I might sound like a crazy person every once in a while. My apologies, but this is the best I have to work with. This game is 100% a sequel to Monster Hunter World. There is not much in commonality with a game like Monster Hunter Rise, which came after World, except for the fact that you do have a mount, right? And obviously, the Sacred, which is the bird raptor-like mount that you have, is pretty similar to the dogs that were obviously in Monster Hunter Rise. So I think from my perspective, just to break down my emotions and feelings of this play session, I'm just going to go through what I remember them doing and sort of just give you a heads up on little moments in between of this 15-minute presentation. I did watch it twice. Again, I went in for a second time to see how different it was, and it was substantially different on a second viewing, and a lot of different stuff happens, so it is a very dynamic world. You start off in the hub, and immediately a lot of the flourishes from Monster Hunter World are all over the place. Game's just got a really distinct visual art style. The smithy girl is there, everyone's there, and then you go out on a hunt. You effectively pull up the map and just look at the extremely detailed map that the hunter pulls up. And you see all the flora and fauna and things just running around. The amount of detail and information is just nuts when this thing happens. And you select the Doshuguma and the herd that it's in, and it immediately pulls up not a quest list like you go to a board. You just sort of see quests that are available, and you just selects it, and it's just you begin the quest. So you call the Sacred and you leave. The old school tried and true way of Monster Hunter of your hub world, and then you select your quest, you load, you enter that zone, is not here anymore. It's just all seamless now. So you just jump on the back of your Sacred and you go. Your Palico follows you. Your Handler also follows you, and you start making your way out. In this process, we see the hunter collecting things, using the slinger to actually grab bugs and stuff really far away. You just point the camera at that bug and you press circle, and the hunter will literally yoink it off the wall with a grappling hook. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. So you can sort of use the slinger to do stuff like that. They did explain that the map size, in comparison to something like Monster Hunter World, is significantly bigger. I think they use the term 2 to 3 times the size of a Monster Hunter World area, like the Ancient Forest, for example. So there's a lot of verticality to this. They showed 3 levels of verticality to each zone, but yeah, significantly vaster. And when you get out there, when you first see the size of it, you're like, whoa, okay, you get this big vista of the area as the hunter leaves the base camp and starts moving out there. There's also several different areas you can choose to like circumvent that distance, where there's another part where they leave the camp and the Sacred climbs across all these mountains. You see this stuff sort of like the trailer, and can sort of scale all this shit and then do a glide. The actual monster can glide across a big plain field, which is cool. It means like you just have more cool looking traversal options. Now, before going out on a hunt, there's a really specific icon, like location, like a glowy part of the map, which signifies that you can create a base camp. And instead of there being an inherent base camp like there is in all the other Monster Hunter games, there's ones that you can make across the map, apparently. And, you know, you can kind of pop it in, and then palicos show up out of nowhere, and they just craft this thing out of like literally nothing. And suddenly you have like a functioning base camp, just like classic, you know, Monster Hunter World. But it seemed like these are acting as like checkpoints and like fast travel points for the entire map. So as soon as you see these, you want to put up a base camp. However, they can be destroyed. They even tried to show us later on that these are destructible. So there's some cool stuff that happens there, that like, hey, your base camps have to be maintained, you know, every once in a while, and you have to go out and make sure some of them are still there, because monsters will, you know, actually beat them up. So anyway, our hunter has pinned the hunt. They go out on the hunt. Everything is seamless. There is no loading. The animations of the hunter on the back of the Sacred, like moving around, are absolutely insane. The level of polish of just like the movement and mobility of the hunter on top of like the mount is just ridiculous. It looks so polished and so good. And then, yeah, you come across the monster. And one thing I do want to start talking about is different interactive elements with creatures. I'm just trying to kind of cover them all in my head. Mounting is back from Monster Hunter World. You get a mount, and then you eventually do minor damage to the monster until you get a big topple attack. There is new crazy topple attack animations for every single weapon. There's also now sneak attacks, where you sneak up on a monster, and then you press like circle at a certain period of time if they're unaware of your position, and you get a big surprise like sneak attack, large amount of damage right at the start. They also show a ghillie mantle when you sneak up on a monster. So I'm assuming that means mantles are back. You know, it would make a lot of sense. They weren't there in Rise. So I'm not super thrilled about that, but you know, still. And other things that we have seen are other ways to engage with monsters. You can jump off the Sacred to potentially get that mantle attack, the mounting attack. And there's also now clash attacks, where depending on the weapon you have, we saw them in this demo, the two different demos I saw with Greatsword, as well as I think it was a heavy bowgun, where the monster will clash with you every once in a while. And this is that animation you see in the trailer of like holding the sword in the mouth of the monster and striking back. There was another one we saw of you cramming the heavy bowgun in the monster's mouth as it's attacking you, which is like a clash attack, and then boom, you like fire a huge shot. The same thing happens with the Greatsword, you know, and you like slap them away. So there's new kind of like cinematic things you can do with monsters. But anyway, Hunter engages the monster. There's a pack of, you know, these smaller versions of them. There's like the alpha one and smaller. I think it's Doshagumas is the name. My apologies. You know, there's a lot of stuff in here that, you know, is new. I don't think that we saw any monsters or like herbivores or anything in the world that resembled stuff that I remember from Monster Hunter Rise or World. So they might be from older games, but everything was like brand new. The whole point is that they want to separate the main monster from the pack, and they start introducing to us field traps in the world. Things like vine traps that you can knock off trees, things like these like spiky bushes that do minor damage and slow down the monsters. We're trying to separate the alpha from the herd, because fighting them as a herd is kind of a huge pain in the neck. And as we do so, we start going over sand dunes and running away. And the music, dude, there's like pursuit music, there's like general world music, which is a very like calming theme, and then there's like, you know, beginning the hunt sort of music as you get close to monsters, and then there's like engaged, you begin the hunt and start fighting, and like the music like kicks in. It's all dynamic and changing, and as soon as the hunter runs away, it turns into like pursuit music, like you're either chasing or being chased by monsters. It felt all very different and very organic as the fight was happening, and it was very cinematic and like action action-packed, huge horns, and I'm probably going to sound crazy describing it, but just trust me, it sounded ridiculously cool from an audio sort of experience. So they're like running away, and then they get to a part of the map that has a sand dune that looks like different than the rest, and the hunter tries to get the other monsters around it, and suddenly it's one of the other monsters we saw from the latest trailer, like these big sandworm, rockworm things, and it pops up and starts snatching one of the smaller Doshiguma out of there, and they all go into like a whirlwind sort of trap that is below the sand. The sand starts like sucking them up, and they're getting like potentially sent to a lower area of the map or something like that. But the alpha holds on because it's bigger and stronger, and all the other guys get sucked up and drop down, but the alpha climbs out and starts pursuing you. So naturally you begin fighting the alpha and engaging it with it in a variety of ways. We learn about focus mode, and focus mode is literally just a targeting reticle without needing like, you know, a heavy bow gun or a bow and arrow. It allows you to specifically focus on the monster and target on weak spots, and technically aim attacks even with melee weapons. It's kind of hard to tell like how this works from a gameplay demonstration without actually utilizing it ourselves, but you know, it is there, and as you focus, it will show weak spots if the monster is currently like, you know, weakened in a certain area, or if it's like damaged in some way. It'll be glowing when you go into focus mode. So that's cool. That's very cool. It seemed like Greatsword had a much different kit before. You know, granted, the devs are going to show a wide variety of things you can do with these weapons, and Greatsword was doing a lot more stuff than just generally, you know, true Greatsword slash, like, and it was not doing just that all the time. There was a lot of like new cleaving animations and dragging animations that you see in the trailer. It looked very cool. And some massive like counter hit attack stuff where I was just like, whoa, that's new. Still felt very heavy, still felt very like grounded, not the speedy sort of insanity that is Monster Hunter Rise. No, this game definitely feels like it is a sequel to Monster Hunter World in terms of the combat. And I had some gripes with the combat and the way it looked and sort of felt just from the trailers. It didn't seem like it was all there yet. No issues at all. In the actual gameplay demonstration, this gameplay demonstration, I swear, looked so much better than what was in the trailers, just with the HUD and everything just active and engaged and doing stuff. Like, man, it was ridiculous. Like, the amount of polish and the amount of, I'd say, budget at work here. This is easily Capcom's biggest game of all time, like, without a doubt. Leading me to the next bit. Every zone that you're into has multiple like levels to it in terms of, I'd say, seasonal like ecology. And they start warning us that the townspeople around are warning the hunter that like, hey, there's a sandstorm's coming, and they're preparing for the sandstorm. So as you're fighting this Doshiguma, the aura of the entire area, which is this big sand dune, starts to change, and you look in the distance and there's this massive wall of sand, darkness filling the area, getting closer and closer, and as you're fighting the Doshiguma, whoosh, it comes in and everything changes. It turns from like day to dark. There's lightning everywhere. There's new hazards. Animals are acting differently. Like, everything suddenly changed. The environment is now a completely new place. The lighting is absolutely friggin' insane. The lightning itself is hitting and flashing and doing all this stuff. It can actually hit the monsters. You can see where it's happening. The zone is 10 times more dangerous now when this shit is going down. It's ridiculously cool, and like I said, you can check the map and it'll tell you like how much stuff has changed during this time frame. New collectibles, new things to look for. You're gonna want to like go on gathering missions and stuff like that when these things are happening. It's like kind of important. So anyway, this is where they can continue the fight, and as they continue the fight, other monsters start showing up, because this isn't just a small zone, it's a massive zone with like multiple monsters. Usually before, in Monster Hunter World, you would look on the map and see like 3 general big monsters at any given time. Now there's just like herds of Doshiguma everywhere, and there's this new sort of like hero giant dragon, not exactly Shigaru Magala from Monster Hunter Rise and other ones. There's this new crazy lightning dragon monster that shows up, and it what we're trying to do is lure our hunting prey to this lightning monster, so we bring it into its den and like effectively like make it mad to the other one. And yeah, they get into a turf war, so turf wars are back. But dude, this new crazy dragon thing that's in the trailer just lightning zaps everything, and it shoots these massive lightning attacks everywhere. It looks ridiculously cool. Some of the new monsters are kind of like crazy creepy looking and kind of gross. This thing looks like a very traditional Monster Hunter dragon type of thing, some badass looking dragon. We lead it away, try to get away from this thing, and in other playthroughs I saw, this dude just swooped in and kind of like was interrupting the hunt every once in a while, seemed to be attracted to, you know, what the hunter was doing every once in a while. So, you know, there was a lot of like different things happening per playthrough as it was going through. More importantly, as you are like hunting and doing all this crazy stuff, the entire perspective of the landscape changes again. The sandstorm moves away after like several minutes, and now it sort of like pushes out all the sand. The desert turns into a time of like bounty, or they called it like plentiful time, something of like, you know, now it's like practically spring, like we're going through seasons. I don't know if they're trying to like give us the impression that this hunt and the time we're taking on this hunt is taking like a long time, like years in terms of time frame, where just seasonal shifts are rapid in this world. But that's the idea, is that we're sort of going through seasonal shifts when you're out here in these zones that are, you know, massive. We've only seen one of these sort of zones, but each zone, at least this one, has 3 different times. And as the sand gets pushed out, you actually see plants, you actually see greenery, you see like different regular herbivores and animals start showing up, or monsters start showing up in this part of the day. And then, yeah, the hunter calls an SOS and, you know, shoots up an SOS. Even though we're not online, it calls in an SOS of 3 NPC hunters that show up all of a sudden and start assisting you. And then you follow the monster to its eventual cave, or I'm sorry, as it's damaged, it's going to go back home to some resting spot. And as you get there, the other hunters put bombs down, and you put a bomb down, but this time you can actually pick up bombs and roll them into the monsters, so you don't have to like do some crazy, you know, charge slash thing and blow yourself up. And then they lead the monster out, you know, we eventually take it down. They did show us some gameplay of some new weapons, so we got to see like the hammer and the insect glaive, and hammer had some new crazy attacks to it, you know, new mounting attacks. Insect glaive had some new crazy Cirque du Soleil bullshit that it was doing, but it looked fairly traditional. I didn't get a chance to analyze everything. And yeah, you take down the monster, and here's the crazy part about it. The monster goes down, the NPC hunters sort of peace out, and you can carve, and it's cool that you don't have to like walk through the monster anymore. You actually walk on top of the monster while carving. I don't know if carving location is going to mean anything, but yes, it's the same traditional Monster Hunter stuff. But the quest is the journey's not over. You finish the quest and you're still active, and it goes into like a quest completion sort of screen, but you're still actively moving around the environment. So it doesn't just finish things anymore. The traditional classic Monster Hunter way of like going out, finishing quests, completing quests, going back, there's more works of like an expedition in Monster Hunter World, where now the way you engage with the environment is up to your choosing. So if you want to stay there and like, oh, it's the time of bountiful plenty, all these new things for gathering is going to be out there, you're probably going to want to go take advantage of that. It's up to you if you want to start a new quest in the field at that given time, or fast travel back to a camp or something like that. It's not going to limit you by like, oh, I'm decided to this and we're going to do this and go to the bulletin board, you know, and do all that kind of stuff, the quest board. It doesn't want to do that anymore. So I don't know how there's going to be other modes. They did say it's going to be 4 hunters, you know, in this relative mode. I was like, man, the zone is so big. Like, how are we going to be teaming up with like 1632 people? They didn't mention anything like that. It seemed fairly traditional Monster Hunter once you're out there. But my God, dude, the craziest part about this was how good the performance was and how good it looked. The lighting, the transition of the environment, the friggin' monster animations, the hunter animations. There is so much new, insane stuff that it just looks crazy. It looks like a true sequel to Monster Hunter World. Visually, I was blown away. And also the game has food porn. Yes, when you go and cook for yourself now and you go out and like make your own meals in the field, you literally get a super splendorous animated cutscene of insanely high resolution meat and cheese and like vegetables and stuff, and the hunter just like cuts into this delicious looking steak and close-ups of mouth and steak, and I'm like, God, and it's like, it's not like, you know, Dragon's Dogma. No, this is all in-game rendered. Bro, the amount of like budget, time, and resources on display here, this is easily Capcom's biggest game of all time. And I can't even tell you how mind blown I was. I could have gone from those first impressions, but I wanted to go back and watch it again. And a whole bunch of crazy different things happened even on a second playthrough. The game also just kind of had performance issues a couple times. It crashed a couple of times due to so many systems on systems. But to me, that was sort of reassuring that this wasn't bullshit. This was an actual game doing this and making and all these systems were functioning. It was nuts. So I know there's going to be more playable stuff in the near future, probably at Gamescom. I hope there will be hands-on and footage available, because you sound sort of crazy talking about this, in my opinion. And from the perspective that I have of Monster Hunter World still being an incredibly good-looking game, but on an old engine with old hardware, this shit felt next generation AF. And on top of all that good news, you know, we got crossplay. Don't even know if we have cross save, but this thing's going to be on PC day one. This shit's going to take over the world, man. I argue that this might be one of the most impressive things I've seen at an E3 event, just behind the scenes. And in terms of this generation, easily one of the most impressive looking games I've seen this generation. I was mind blown. The attention to detail and the world that they're making here didn't come across as sort of drab and just sand-like, where it's like, oh, there's just no detail, like we saw in some of the parts of the trailer. No, this shit was ridiculously impressive, and this was not even a big story thing. Either way, I don't think we got any B-roll, unfortunately, to show of this stuff. It's just like the previous trailers, as well as screenshots. I hope I don't sound too insane talking about this, but it was very impressive. And easily is one of my most anticipated games of 2025. I'm going to take every opportunity I can to learn more about this, because Monster Hunter Wilds seems to be it. It really is. This is the true sequel to Monster Hunter World. This is Capcom, no holds barred. That was their best-selling game of all time, and they're taking that shit seriously. And that's my overall impressions. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. I'll be back with more updates with Monster Hunter Wilds as soon as possible, especially if I get to play it. As always, dudes, I appreciate a thumbs up if you get an opportunity to drop that in here, or leave a comment if you're looking forward to this stuff as much as me. My name is Max, and I'll see you dudes next time.